A woman's greatest power is not in how loudly she speaks, but in how deeply she listens to herself. In a world driven by noise, visibility, and performance, there is something magnetic, utterly irresistible, about a woman who has nothing to prove. She doesn't chase attention, she commands it. Not by volume, but by vibration. And yet many women confuse maturity with age, or power with external success. But true maturity is energetic, it is spiritual, it is psychological. It shows not in how you react when things are smooth, but in how you respond when storms arrive. In Eastern traditions, a lotus flower blooms untouched by the muddy waters beneath. That is the metaphor of a mature woman. She is grounded, rooted, and nourished from within, making her beauty inevitable, her presence unforgettable. Today, we explore 6 habits that do not make a woman just likable or attractive, but undeniably irresistible. Not for her outer beauty, but for her self-mastery, her stillness, and her deep inner clarity. Let us begin. A woman who has matured not only in age but in consciousness carries a quiet power. It does not clamor for attention, nor does it seek to dominate a room. Rather, it is the kind of energy that compels people to pause, to look again, to feel differently in her presence. This kind of woman has cultivated stillness, not as an occasional practice, but as a daily way of being. And from that stillness, her words emerge with weight. Her silence, even more so. Imagine a conversation where someone speaks rapidly, interrupting often, trying to be understood but never listening. Compare that to a woman who pauses before she responds, who listens not just with her ears, but with her entire awareness. When she speaks, every word is deliberate, not out of fear, but because she understands that words are instruments. Some heal, others harm. She has chosen her words like a craftsman selects his tools, with precision, with care, and with deep understanding of their impact. Stillness is not passive. It is not inaction. It is the space from which true discernment arises. Modern neuroscience has begun to confirm what ancient wisdom traditions have taught for centuries. When we pause, when we breathe deeply, the parasympathetic nervous system is activated. This is the part of the nervous system responsible for rest, reflection, and repair. In this state, our brain becomes more capable of insight, emotional regulation, and empathy. We are no longer reacting from survival, but responding from presence. This becomes especially powerful in the realm of relationships. In emotionally charged moments, when a partner says something hurtful, or when a disagreement surfaces, it is often instinct to defend, to explain, or to match intensity. But a woman who has practiced inner stillness does something else. She does not run from discomfort, but she also does not let it drive her actions. She observes. She breathes. She allows silence to do what words often cannot. Calm the emotional waters so that truth can rise to the surface. A real life story can illustrate this. A woman named Lena had been married for over a decade. She and her husband often clashed over small matters. Over time, their communication had become reactive. One evening, during yet another disagreement about something trivial, her husband snapped at her with a harsh tone. Previously, she would have immediately defended herself or responded with equal frustration. But this time, Lena paused. She didn't speak. She looked at him, calm, present, not cold, not passive, just there. That silence disrupted the familiar script. Her husband, surprised, softened. He took a deep breath and said, "I'm sorry. I don't know why I said that." What changed? The words? No, it was her stillness. In that moment, she didn't need to win the argument. She had mastered the space between stimulus and response. And in doing so, she gave both herself and her partner access to something deeper, emotional clarity. A mature woman learns this not by reading or watching, but through experience. She may have gone through seasons where her reactivity cost her peace. She may have lost people she loved because of impulsive words. And through those losses, through that fire, she found the value of waiting before speaking, the power of not always needing to fill the silence. Stillness is also contagious. In a chaotic environment, one-centered person can change the atmosphere. This is especially true in families, in friendships, in romantic partnerships. When a woman learns to ground herself, through breath, through awareness, through reflection, others begin to mirror her energy. Children become calmer. Conversations deepen. Conflict becomes less frequent, not because problems disappear, but because the response to them has evolved. The practical strategy is simple, yet profound. Before speaking, especially in emotionally intense moments, pause and take one conscious breath. Feel it enter your body. Feel it leave. Ask yourself, is what I'm about to say true? Is it necessary? Is it kind? This isn't about being soft-spoken or silent in every situation. It's about becoming intentional, purposeful, rooted in inner peace rather than external noise. There's a famous proverb, better to remain silent and be thought wise than to speak and remove all doubt. But silence, in its most elevated form, is not about withholding. It's about understanding that words are sacred. A mature woman knows she doesn't need to explain herself constantly, defend her worth, or prove her point at every turn. Her stillness is her strength. Her restraint becomes her magnetism. From stillness, a woman naturally begins to see the value of what comes next: emotional hygiene. Just as we would not leave our physical bodies unwashed for days, a wise woman does not allow her emotional residue to accumulate unchecked. Every day, we experience emotions, some light, some heavy, some confusing. Left unprocessed, they don't disappear, they build. And what builds eventually spills into our words, our decisions, and our relationships. Emotional hygiene is the habit of cleaning the inner world. It is not dramatic. It is not always visible, but it is deeply transformational. Research in psychology shows that when emotions are repressed or ignored, they don't vanish. They get stored in the body. The body keeps score, as one renowned psychologist described. Unfelt grief can become fatigue. Suppressed anger might turn into resentment or chronic tension. A mature woman doesn't wait for an emotional breakdown to tend to her inner world. She makes it part of her lifestyle. Think of a woman named Maria. She had spent much of her life taking care of others. Children, parents, friends. She was the strong one, the dependable one. But underneath her calm demeanor, she carried years of unspoken disappointment and unmet needs. One day, during a routine conversation with her adult daughter, a minor disagreement turned into a flood of tears. It surprised them both. Maria later reflected that she hadn't cried in years. She had kept moving, kept doing, but hadn't felt. That moment became a turning point. She began a daily practice of journaling. Nothing elaborate, just 5 minutes each evening to write down what she felt that day. Over time, something shifted. Her energy lightened. Her sleep improved. Her relationships deepened. Not because others changed, but because she started showing up from a place of wholeness, not suppressed pain. Emotional hygiene doesn't always look like therapy sessions or dramatic releases. Sometimes, it's as subtle as sitting in silence for 10 minutes each morning and asking, "What am I feeling right now?" Sometimes, it's naming an emotion, without judgment. I feel sad. I feel anxious. I feel hopeful. Naming in psychological terms is a regulating act. It moves emotion from the limbic brain into the prefrontal cortex, allowing us to work with the feeling instead of being overwhelmed by it. One of the most overlooked aspects of emotional hygiene is boundaries. A mature woman knows that she cannot keep her emotional space clean if she allows toxic energy to keep entering it. This doesn't mean cutting off every difficult relationship, but it does mean being discerning. It means asking, who drains me consistently? Where do I leave feeling confused, small, or agitated? Who do I feel safe being myself with? These are not selfish questions. They are necessary ones. There's a powerful story from Eastern philosophy about a teacher who tells his student, "Your mind is like a garden. If you do not tend it, weeds will grow, not because you want them to, but because that is the nature of untended soil." Emotions are the same. A woman who wants clarity, emotional depth, and relational peace must learn to tend her inner garden. That may mean releasing old patterns, outdated beliefs, or unresolved pain. It may mean forgiving, not to excuse others, but to free herself from emotional debt. Emotionally mature women also understand the difference between processing and dumping. There is a fine line. Dumping is when we unload our emotions onto others without awareness or consent. Processing is when we share with intention, perhaps with a trusted friend or therapist, but with ownership. This is what I'm feeling, and I'm taking responsibility for it. That level of emotional discipline builds trust. It creates safety in relationships because it communicates, I am responsible for my inner world. I do not expect you to fix me, but I welcome your presence as I move through it. Finally, Emotional hygiene empowers a woman to love without losing herself, to care deeply without collapsing into others' emotions. It gives her the strength to say no when needed, to walk away from what doesn't honor her, and to open her heart again. This time, from a place of strength, not need. So when a woman cultivates stillness before she speaks, and when she maintains her emotional hygiene with quiet diligence, something profound begins to happen. Her relationships evolve. Not because others suddenly become better, but because she is no longer operating from emotional chaos. Her inner world becomes clear, her presence becomes calm. And in a world full of urgency, reactivity, and emotional noise, that calmness becomes the most irresistible quality of all. There is a rare and unforgettable kind of woman. One who asks for nothing, but inspires everything. She does not persuade with demands or manipulate with emotion. She doesn't chase love, nor does she plead for affection or understanding. And yet, the way she shows up, the clarity in her energy, the rootedness in her being, invites others to offer their best. Not out of pressure, not out of obligation, but because they want to. Her influence is not loud, it is gravitational. This woman does not believe that her value comes from proving herself. She has passed through the phase of needing to be chosen, validated, or pursued, not because she has grown cold, but because she has grown whole. She is connected to her own source, and from that inner source, she creates a field around her that inspires others to rise. In relationships, this kind of presence transforms everything. When a woman is no longer centered in expectation, when she is no longer looking for someone to complete her, she becomes deeply attractive. Why? Because people are drawn to energy that is already complete. It feels safe, it feels uplifting, and it invites authenticity. Instead of pulling others toward her, she becomes a mirror in which others see who they could become. Consider the story of Amina. After the end of a long and painful relationship, she began a process of internal rebuilding. For many years, she had been the kind of woman who gave endlessly, overextending herself, compromising her needs, and subtly expecting others to give back in return. When they didn't, she felt drained, disappointed, and resentful. But something shifted when she started asking a new question. Who am I when I'm not seeking? That question led her to a quiet season of solitude. She traveled alone, meditated daily, tended to her home and her health, not for anyone else, not to be more lovable, but simply to know herself again. Months later, when she began engaging socially again, people noticed something had changed. She was still warm and kind, but there was a new stillness in her, a detachment from outcomes. In conversation, she listened deeply. When asked about her life, she shared openly, but without a hint of performance. She didn't need anyone to see her in a certain way. She had already seen herself. And this is the secret: when a woman asks for nothing, she gives others the space to act from freedom. That is when love becomes sincere. That is when devotion becomes voluntary. And anything offered voluntarily becomes 10 times more powerful. There's a kind of emotional maturity that understands what is inspired is always more valuable than what is demanded. Neuroscience supports this. Studies in social dynamics show that human beings are biologically wired to respond better to inspiration than coercion. When people feel free to choose their actions, whether in romantic love, friendship, or work, they engage more fully. Their brain associates the action with intrinsic motivation, leading to deeper satisfaction and more sustainable connection. This means that in relationships, inspiration holds more weight than negotiation. A woman who lives fully in her values doesn't need to ask someone to respect her. Her life demands it, silently. Not through aggression or confrontation, but through alignment. When she holds herself to a high standard of self-respect, anyone in her presence is faced with a choice: rise to meet her energy, or fall away. Either way, she does not chase. She does not lower her frequency to hold on to what cannot meet her. There's a short story from a meditation teacher who once said, "Be like the sun. The sun never begs anyone to look at it. Yet when it rises, everything turns toward it." A mature woman becomes this kind of sun. Her radiance is internal. It does not need to announce itself. It simply shines, and others choose how to respond. This principle also extends into how she navigates challenges and emotional needs. A woman who inspires, rather than asks, has learned how to care for her emotional world without placing the burden of her healing on another person. This does not mean she is emotionally isolated. Quite the opposite. She is capable of deep connection, vulnerability, and honesty, but she never confuses sharing with dependency. She communicates with clarity, not code. When she feels lonely, she names it gently. When she needs space, she takes it respectfully. When she loves without trying to control, and in doing so, she becomes a safe space for others to be themselves. One might ask, but if she never asks, doesn't that mean she'll never receive? This is a common misconception. The truth is, when a woman is deeply connected to her own wholeness, she receives more than she ever did when she asked from lack. Why? Because her presence invites generosity. It doesn't extract, it evokes. When a partner feels that their efforts are inspired by admiration, not demanded by pressure, their giving becomes joyful. It becomes an act of devotion, not duty. Think of two scenarios. In the first, a woman tells her partner, "You never do anything romantic for me. I always have to ask." The partner might comply, out of guilt or to end the conflict. But the energy is forced. Now imagine a second woman who, without a word of complaint, lives her life with beauty. She lights candles at dinner, tends to her space with love, and expresses appreciation when kindness is given. Her partner, moved by the atmosphere she creates, finds himself wanting to contribute to it. One day, he brings her flowers, not because she asked, but because she inspired the desire to give. The difference is subtle, but profound. One demands, the other invites, and the invitation is far more powerful than the command. This habit of not asking but inspiring is also deeply tied to feminine energy, not in a stereotypical or aesthetic sense, but in its energetic form. Feminine energy at its highest expression is receptive, nurturing, and magnetic. It does not chase, it attracts. It draws toward itself not by force, but by resonance. A mature woman lives in this frequency. She doesn't need to say, "I am worthy." She radiates worth through her presence, her peace, and her joy. And because of that, others feel honored to be in her world. There's an ancient teaching. That which comes through pressure will require pressure to stay. That which comes through grace will stay through grace. Relationships built on pleading and proving rarely endure. But those built on mutual admiration and inspired giving become sacred partnerships. Let us not mistake this approach for aloofness or emotional unavailability. This is not about withholding affection or manipulating through silence. In fact, the mature woman is more emotionally available because she is emotionally sovereign. She does not use love to fill a void. She offers it from overflow. She gives without agenda. She receives without entitlement. Another real-life example comes from a woman named Hannah. After years of overfunctioning in relationships, always planning, initiating, managing, she decided to experiment with surrender. Not surrender as weakness, but surrender as trust. She began pulling her energy back from constantly arranging everything and instead focused on embodying her values. She focused on creating beauty in her life, painting, volunteering, cooking, laughing. And what she found was stunning. The people around her began stepping forward. Friends checked in more often. Her partner began planning dates without being asked. Even her teenage children became more engaged and respectful. Why? Because Hannah had stopped doing everything for everyone, and in doing so, she made space for others to rise. There is wisdom in restraint. When we stop overgiving, over-explaining, and overextending, we leave space for others to contribute. This is a key truth in emotional dynamics. When one person does too much, the other does too little. A woman who inspires knows this. She does not abandon herself in the name of connection. She keeps her center and allows others to meet her there. This kind of woman is rare, not because it is hard to be her, but because the world teaches us the opposite. We are told to hustle for love, to prove our worth, to always be doing. But maturity whispers a different truth. Stillness speaks. Presence persuades. Integrity inspires. She lives this truth not as a performance, but as a quiet revolution. She knows that the energy behind her actions matters more than the action itself. She knows that asking from lack weakens the bond, while living from wholeness strengthens it. She knows that love, when inspired, becomes a sacred exchange. And so she walks through life with ease, not because everything is easy, but because she no longer struggles to be seen. She is already seen by herself. She no longer begs to be understood. She understands herself. She no longer fears being alone because her own company has become rich, full, and nourishing. And in that place of inner richness, she becomes irresistibly magnetic, not by trying, but by being. She becomes a living invitation for love, for respect, for generosity, not by asking, but by becoming someone others want to give those things to. This is the essence of mature feminine energy. This is the quiet brilliance of a woman who asks for nothing, yet inspires everything. A woman who has mastered her inner landscape moves through the world with a kind of calm that doesn't come from luck or circumstance. It comes from deep, personal work. She doesn't react to every trigger, doesn't lose herself in chaos, and doesn't bend every time someone disapproves. She has come to understand that her true home is not a place, not a person, not even a relationship. It is her inner state. And when that state is clean, grounded, and cared for, no external disruption can truly shake her. This understanding changes everything. It changes how she handles heartbreak, how she walks through conflict, how she loves, how she leads. Because when a woman has trained herself to stay rooted in her own awareness, she becomes emotionally sovereign. Not distant, not indifferent, but stable. Like a mountain, winds may blow, rain may fall, but she remains, watching from within. That is a woman who cannot be manipulated. That is a woman who cannot be destroyed by someone else's instability. There is an ancient teaching that says, the mind is a garden. It will grow weeds if you do not plant flowers intentionally. A woman who is irresistible in her maturity does not leave her inner world unattended. She knows that just as a body must be nourished, exercised, and rested, the inner world, the world of thoughts, emotions, and energy, must also be tended to daily. She wakes up not only to prepare for the world outside, but to check in with the world inside. She begins her day not with a race toward obligations, but with a return to center. Before she answers to others, she answers to herself. What am I feeling today? What do I need to honor within me? These small inner check-ins may sound simple, but they are revolutionary. Because in a world that pulls women in 1,000 directions, this woman has learned how to return to herself again and again. There's a story of a woman named Lydia, a mother of 3, business owner, and daughter to aging parents. Her life, like many others, was filled with responsibility. She had always been reliable, competent, available. But after years of overextension, she began experiencing panic attacks and emotional exhaustion. She tried to fix her external life, reorganizing her schedule, changing jobs, adjusting diet. But nothing truly helped until one morning, she realized the problem was not outside. The problem was within. She had not been listening to her inner world. She had been betraying her own needs quietly, every day. When a woman embodies stillness before she speaks, cares for her emotions like sacred ground, moves with deliberate grace, holds silence as a sign of strength, inspires rather than demands, and anchors herself in an inner state of peace, she becomes a force that does not need to prove itself. Her presence alone teaches, her energy alone uplifts, and her life becomes a quiet, unwavering testament to the power of self-mastery. She is not irresistible because she seeks attention, but because she radiates intention. She does not chase connection, she attracts alignment. She doesn't need to explain her worth, because everything about how she lives declares it clearly. And in a world full of noise, urgency, and emotional confusion, such a woman becomes rare, unforgettable, and deeply magnetic. Not through effort, but through embodiment, through devotion to her own growth, through the unshakable stillness she has cultivated within. She is not waiting to be chosen. She is the choice. So Lydia made one change. She began every morning with 20 minutes of silence. Sometimes she meditated. Sometimes she journaled. Sometimes she just stared out the window and breathed. But no matter what, she gave herself that time to return. That one act changed the quality of her relationships. Her patience increased. Her anxiety decreased. She stopped absorbing everyone else's energy because she was anchored in her own. She no longer reacted from a depleted place. She responded from awareness. That shift, from unconscious reaction to conscious response, transformed her life. Emotional reactivity often stems from a disorganized inner landscape. When a woman has not spent time knowing herself, she becomes easily pulled into others' storms. A passing comment becomes a personal attack. A moment of silence feels like abandonment. A disagreement feels like a rejection of her worth. But when she has done the work, when she knows her value deeply, when she has made peace with her story, she doesn't internalize every storm. She doesn't personalize every wave. She lets the wind blow, but she does not allow it to uproot her. This inner anchoring also allows her to love without losing herself. Many people think love requires sacrifice. And while love does involve giving, it should never cost a woman her identity. A mature woman knows the difference between healthy compromise and emotional self-erasure. She can bend without breaking. She can be soft without collapsing. She can be available without becoming dependent. And that balance is only possible because her self-awareness is strong. She is not afraid of solitude. In fact, she seeks it. Because she understands that only in solitude can she truly hear herself. Not the voice shaped by culture or trauma or fear, but the real voice beneath it all. The voice of intuition. The voice that says, "This is right for you," or "This is costing your peace." A woman who listens to that voice walks with a different kind of certainty. Her choices may not always be popular, but they are aligned. And when she is aligned, her energy becomes compelling. In relationships, this shows up as clarity. She is not passive, waiting for someone to define the relationship. Nor is she desperate, trying to force a future. She knows what she wants, and more importantly, she knows what she needs to feel like herself. That clarity protects her. She doesn't waste time where love is confused or where energy is not mutual. She recognizes the signs of emotional imbalance early, not because someone told her, but because her own body gives her clear signals. Tension in the chest, unease in the gut, a shift in her peace. She has learned to read these as information. This kind of emotional intelligence is not taught in schools. It is cultivated through silence, through reflection, through repeated practice. A woman who has mastered her inner landscape does not deny her emotions. She feels them fully. She lets them rise. But she does not let them govern her. She knows that emotion is energy in motion. If given space, it will pass. If resisted, it will persist. So she breathes. She observes. She names her sadness, her longing, her fear. But she does not collapse under their weight. She stands beside them, like an old friend who knows how to comfort without clinging. Her emotional presence also makes her a powerful partner. Not because she fixes others, but because she holds space for them. She does not panic when her partner is struggling. She doesn't try to control their journey. She trusts their process and maintains her own. This interdependence, not codependence, is the mark of a woman who is rooted. She is not looking to be saved, and she is not trying to save anyone. She is walking her path with love, with strength, and with open eyes. There is another story of a woman named Nayla. She had recently ended a long-term relationship that had grown toxic over time. In the past, she would have jumped into distractions. Another romance, busy schedules, social media validation. But this time she chose something different. She turned inward. She began studying her own patterns. She asked herself hard questions. Why did I stay when I wasn't respected? What belief in me allowed that to continue? The answers were uncomfortable, but they brought clarity. She realized that her need for approval had often led her to compromise her dignity. That realization didn't shame her. It empowered her. Over the next year, Nayla invested in her emotional growth. She joined a small women's circle where she practiced vulnerability. She read sacred texts, practiced breathing exercises, and reconnected with nature. One evening, at a small gathering, she met someone new. But this time, the dynamic was different. She wasn't trying to impress. She wasn't shrinking. She was just herself, open, centered, aware. And the connection that formed was not based on emotional gaps or shared trauma. It was based on mutual respect, shared values, and emotional maturity. This is what happens when a woman clears her inner landscape. Her outer life begins to match the clarity she carries inside. She no longer settles for relationships that confuse her. She no longer needs chaos to feel alive. She does not accept love that costs her peace. Because she understands that peace is not a luxury. It is a necessity. The physiology of this peace is also profound. When the nervous system is balanced, the body heals. The immune system strengthens. The digestive system functions better. The sleep deepens. The skin glows. All of this is tied to the inner state. A woman who has regulated her nervous system through conscious breath, through stillness, through daily self-awareness practices, she does not just feel better. She looks different. Her energy becomes medicine to herself and to those around her. Others may not be able to articulate what it is, but they feel it. In her presence, people feel calmer, more honest, more seen. Not because she is perfect, but because she is present. Her presence becomes the mirror that allows others to meet themselves more honestly. This is not about charisma. It's about coherence. When the inner world is coherent, the outer world follows. But coherence does not mean the absence of pain. A woman who has done this work has likely suffered. She has likely been misunderstood, heartbroken, even betrayed. But she has transmuted that pain into wisdom. She has not used her wounds as excuses. She has used them as windows into herself, into others, into the deeper truths of human experience. And that wisdom becomes her power. She no longer sees relationships as places to lose herself. She sees them as sacred invitations to grow, to expand, to deepen. And if a relationship no longer honors her, she leaves, not from anger, but from clarity. Because she no longer sacrifices her inner state to maintain a connection that no longer reflects her truth. She has learned that peace is not passive. It is powerful. It is not weak to walk away from chaos. It is brave. It is not selfish to protect your inner world. It is essential. Because when a woman is at peace with herself, she becomes a sanctuary. A place where others feel safe, not because she absorbs their pain, but because she doesn't add to it. Her calm becomes contagious. Her clarity becomes a compass. And this is the woman who is truly irresistible, not for her appearance, not for her accomplishments, but for her state of presence, her state of peace, her state of alignment. That inner state shapes every word, every gesture, every relationship. She has mastered her inner world. And now, the outer world has no choice but to respond in kind. When a woman embodies stillness before she speaks, cares for her emotions like sacred ground, moves with deliberate grace, holds silence as a sign of strength, inspires rather than demands, and anchors herself in an inner state of peace, she becomes a force that does not need to prove itself. Her presence alone teaches. Her energy alone uplifts. And her life becomes a quiet, unwavering testament to the power of self-mastery. She is not irresistible because she seeks attention, but because she radiates intention. She does not chase connection. She attracts alignment. She doesn't need to explain her worth, because everything about how she lives declares it clearly. And in a world full of noise, urgency, and emotional confusion, such a woman becomes rare, unforgettable, and deeply magnetic, not through effort, but through embodiment, through devotion to her own growth, through the unshakable stillness she has cultivated within. She is not waiting to be chosen. She is the choice.